question. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our tutor talk this evening. My name is Lynn Reddy Aspiotis. I am the Beaver County and Airport Area Program Coordinator at Literacy Pittsburgh. So thank you for being here, taking time out of your busy schedules. We appreciate it. I see some familiar faces that I've seen before at the Spring Tutor Conference. So welcome back. It's nice to see you. And for those of you I haven't met, welcome, and it's very nice to meet you. So tonight we're going to talk about vocabulary resources for adult basic education and ESL. So thank you for joining me. And if you're here, I assume you have some interest in helping your students with the very important vocabulary. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so let's start with, does anyone want to share how you currently are teaching vocabulary, new vocabulary words with your students? Anyone have anything that's working for them or maybe not working for them? Oh, I'm sorry, there's some chat. You keep freezing. Then your audio is choppy. You need to turn off camera. Okay. Okay.
I kind of struggle with teaching vocabulary to the students, so I'm really curious to see what the possibilities are. Some things are easy, especially nouns are easy, because you can show them a picture. But things like adverbs are really much more difficult, and so I'll be curious to see. And some words don't even seem to have a really good translation into the other language. So that's an additional challenge. So I'm curious. I'm very curious.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Paula. Can everyone hear me a little bit better now?
Yes, much better.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. So let's talk about, has anyone used any of these types of things? I thought of some things that I've seen, and I should mention, I apologize, I forgot to mention that before I started working for Literacy Pittsburgh, I actually was an adjunct instructor at Community College of Allegheny County for 7 years, and before that was a reading specialist. So I've been in education for actually about 24 years. So I've used these things in classrooms all the way from early elementary through college. And the things that we're going to talk about tonight. So the things I have on the screen are things that I've seen done in different classrooms. Some are probably more effective than others. The things I'm going to go over tonight are the following. Has anyone ever heard of any of these? The Frayer model, concept sorts, or using a context clues journal? Okay, so let's start with the first one. This is the Frayer model. Let me look at my chat. Okay, great. Photo, image. Okay, great. So the basic definition, if I had to answer it, was it's a visual way or a graphic organizer to understand new vocabulary. The definition that teachhub.com gives is right below it. which says it's a type of graphic organizer that uses a four-square model to determine, clarify, and analyze word meaning and structure. So let's look at it in a little bit of detail. What does it look like? Okay, so here's the four squares. And there are there are many different ways that you could do this, okay? And if you Google, you can just simply do a Google search and you'll see different representations or slightly different visuals come up. But here's the basic idea behind it. And this could be done on a full sheet of plain notebook paper. So if you have students that keep a notebook, maybe you make one of the sections of that notebook, or maybe the whole notebook is just for vocabulary, right? And learning new vocabulary words. This image could cover up an entire notebook page. Or it could be on a half a page and they can create it, or you can create this like a simple blank template and make a bunch of copies. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be perfect. It could just be them drawing with their pencil, right? So here's the idea. And it doesn't have to stick to this exact plan. So if we go to the next slide that says, can I change these categories? So maybe you like the idea, but you don't like those actual labels. Okay. Maybe you didn't like that it said examples. Let me go back. Examples. Some teachers I've noticed, they don't like using non-examples. That's fine. You can change this to make it yours and to make it unique. And it can be different every time. What do I mean by that? So we don't have to call it a concept. We can call it the new word. And for ESL students, that is probably what you would want to do. You would label that or call that oval or whatever in the middle. That's your new word. Okay, that's the new word, the unknown word that you're trying to define. Now, I'm sorry. That section that says facts and or characteristics, that doesn't have to be like that either. Maybe you don't like that section. And keep in mind, you could literally change this word to word depending on the word and depending what makes sense. Some words, a picture's not going to be a good section. If it's an adverb, that's going to be kind of hard to draw a picture for, right? But other words definitely will be, that's a great category to have, especially if you have a visual learner. And extra, especially if you have someone that likes to draw, right? Someone that's has artistic ability. Another section that you could change if you don't like it is synonyms. Now, this you have to be a little careful with for ESL learners. You don't want to get this might be more suitable for an ABE student, someone who's studying for the GED. And you could, again, also use antonyms. But again, you have to keep in mind your learners and what level they're at. Probably not going to use synonyms or antonyms for a beginner ESL level student. Can anyone think of any other categories that you might use? How about part of speech? Let me check the chat real fast here. Someone said homophones, Great. I think I have a note about that in one of my upcoming slides, actually. And here's another one that's really good, especially for an intrapersonal learner or someone that's just very in tune with him or herself. So someone who learns by making personal connections. You want to ask that student, use that word in a personal sentence. When we form those personal connections, that very much helps us to remember the meaning of the word. Any questions about any of that? Does it make sense? Is it something you think that you might try? Anyone used anything like it before?
When you use this, do you, so you have the students actually draw this or you use it as a pictorial so they can then use that and apply it when they come across words in their own study or when they talk to somebody and they hear a new word, right? So is that the idea here to get them to use this template?
Yeah, Paula, it's a good question. And I'm going to talk about that actually in a minute. Like
Okay.
where do the words come from? Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. That's in like, yep, 2 more slides. But the simple answer to your question is yes. They can use, now they don't have to use this for every single new word, right? That might be a lot of work depending on how much effort they put into it. But ideally, yes, it could be used for any new word. It's kind of like a glorified flashcard, right? So flashcards to me were always kind of boring and didn't always work because you had what? The definition on the front, or I'm sorry, the word on the front and the definition on the back. Sometimes that's just not enough. Sometimes you just need more. You have to take it like a couple steps further. And this model, and again, you can change this model and simplify it and make it your own. There's so many versions. You don't have to do, what's on the screen. That's why I gave different, adaptations to it. But going that like extra couple steps will help like cement the word into their memory much better than just a regular old flashcard. Okay, let's take a look at an example of how this works. I'm going to start out very simple with a very easy noun, okay, that we all know. So what's the definition? They would write that in one of the quadrants. On this one, facts and characteristics, facts and or characteristics. And then we'll do some examples. And then we'll do some non-examples. Okay, now we're going to get harder. I purposely started with a very easy word that we all know so that you could just get the idea of how it works. But let's look at something more difficult. All right, for this one, we're going to use the new word principle. So let's give it a definition. Going to add an image. And some of these words are going to be very hard to have synonyms or antonyms for, so that might be a quadrant that you choose to change the label for that quadrant to something different. And you might want to you could have like a whole section for this, but I added this extra note here when we talked about, someone mentioned homophones, I think, right? You can make a little note. If there's something special about that word, if it's an easily confused word, that's where you can make a little note. Don't confuse this with, and that would be definitely important for all learners, but probably especially ESL learners, because principal and principal, it might be a little confusing. Any thoughts? And again, this can be done on a small or a larger. Do you ever see those large index cards? They're really nice. They're like not your traditional size. I don't even know what the size is for a traditional, but there's index cards that are nice and big. Those would be great for this. But again, you could just do it on a blank piece of paper. You could leave the quadrants blank, like literally make a blank four-quadrant image and don't label them, because maybe you label like new word and definition, but leave the other ones blank, because again, you might adjust it or change it each time for each new word. So like you don't want to feel like you have to shove something into a certain category, right? When it just might not fit, or it might not be, it just might not make sense. Anyone on this call who teaches math by any chance? Nobody's on here for math, then I'll go through the next slide very quickly. But I want to show you how I created this for math. I thought one of my math tutors might be on here. But I want to show you how adaptable this concept is. All right, who remembers the Pythagorean theorem? I'm guessing if you're not math teachers, some of you may not remember or may not know, but that'll probably come back to you. So for this one, and my point for having this slide was to show that you can adjust this to even to math, right? Because we have to remember terms in math. We have to know what these things are. So like I said, I'll go through this slide quickly. Definitely a picture would help me anyway. I'm not a math person, so I would definitely want to. Oh, Susan remembered. She put it in the chat. Now, sorry, this Zoom toolbar, I never know where to put it. But again, see, it's not going to be a synonym for that. So it's a great example of where you can, even you don't feel like you have to have something in all four quadrants. Even if you have something in 3 of the quadrants, it's still better than a regular flashcard, right? So what isn't the Pythagorean theorem? It's not circumference, it's not diameter, etc. All right, so someone asked the question, where am I getting these words? Well, typically, it's best to learn new words authentically whenever possible, but that's not always possible. You don't always have the time or the, you don't always have the time for that. So, but, and also, if you were doing it for every time a student came across a new word, then you'd be doing this nonstop. So you're probably not going to do it for every new word. But whenever students come across a new word, and especially if they ask about it, like if they say to you, Karen, what does this word mean? I've never heard this word before. I don't have any clue. Then there you go. Maybe that's a good opportunity to say, why don't we add this? Why don't we create a little Frayer model for that word? So it doesn't have to be every new word. Or maybe it's just the words they're having trouble with, that they can't seem to remember. And then you say, maybe this is a good word. We need to do a little bit more. Seem to be having trouble remembering this word. Let's take it a little step further and look at it more deeply. but it's more likely that the words are coming from a list of words, either that you have, maybe from a book you're working from or a resource that you're using. But they could also come from, if you have, this would be probably more like advanced ESL students, if they have a job field in mind, right? I know you can, I used to do this at CCAC. I would ask my students what their career path was, and then I would just Google, I would Google nursing vocabulary, Google, I don't know, trying to think of something else, I don't know, carpentry vocabulary. And then you can help them get familiar with the words in that area, and the words could come from there. So it's very.
Your sound is still not working very well.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know why. Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
No.
You could all try muting, maybe. I don't know what is wrong with my connection. Okay. Can everyone please turn off cameras? Okay, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to continue, and I apologize for the bad connection. All right, let me move on. The words that you choose could also come from just a list of words that you have in a vocabulary book or resource that you're using. Okay, I'm going to move on to concept sorts. What is a concept sort? Concept sorts ask students to think about what they know, and they do that by comparing it and contrasting it to new information. It's an interactive way to introduce, but also to review vocabulary, and that is according to Reading Rocket. Now, there's some things I want to note here. And these are pretty important. Only try this activity when students are relatively familiar. So it's not, you wouldn't use it first time you introduce a new word. They're only for words that have already been introduced and talked about. This goes for pretty much everything you do with teaching. Always model how to do it first, because we can't expect students to do something that we've never shown them how to do. This activity can be challenging and sometimes frustrating the first time. It's okay, it's supposed to be challenging. Do it with them or model it a couple of times before, they get the hang of it, of course, depending on the student. And this is how it works. So how does it work? So these could be on basic index cards, your basic generic sized index card. These could also be your concept cards, because on the concept card, you'll have the new word, the unknown word. And on the back, it'd be your concept card that you created in the first step. Okay, so this is that nice visual representation. And on the back of that, you simply write what the word is. Okay, and then the idea is you have several of these. Now, let's say we have these 6 words. Let's say these were new vocabulary words that you've introduced, you've reviewed, and the student has a good handle on them. Don't do more than 6 at once. Start out easy with like 6 words. And here's how it works. The other thing you need are categories. So I'm going to name 2 categories. I'm going to name them, first one, things that guide you, and the other one will be characteristics of a hard worker. We're going to take those categories and we're going to move these cards into the right category. So here we go. Things that guide you, principles, characteristics of a hard worker, determination. Let me get rid of the spotlight. And they would physically move them because we're pretending these are like on an index card, right? Something you can physically move. And you would have a conversation, a discussion, and actually talk about these things as they're doing it. The idea here is that you're challenging them, you're getting them to really understand these definitions, and you're also getting them to see how things relate to one another. In this activity, you will get a very good idea if they understand the meaning of the word. Now, some questions to consider. Can some words fit into both categories? What do you think? Definitely. And if that happens, it's great, because then you can have a dialogue and you can have that discussion and really get them talking and thinking. This activity would be more geared towards, I would say this would be really good practice for the GED test. So if any of you are GED tutors, I would keep it simpler for ESL students, but you can adjust to meet the needs of your students. And students, if you have a small group, they can work together and have those discussions to do that. But this would be really, really good for GED students, for sure. If you really want to challenge students and you're looking to make this activity more difficult, we can always do that. Instead of 2 headings, try 3. Or don't give them headings at all and ask them to come up with the headings. That's very challenging. Or add more concept cards into the mix. Did I link? Yes, I did. So I'll send this out, but if you're familiar with the PARE lesson plans, there is a lesson plan that I can send you that is very similar. And it's on the PA Adult Education Resources website. Hopefully you all are using that website, because there are some really good lesson plans on there. And I think another coordinator either just recently did her talk on those resources, or maybe that's coming up in one of the next tutor talks. I can't remember if it was done already or if it's going to be done soon. If anyone is remote, how could you do this remote? You can do it. You just have to get a little bit creative and look a little bit different, but you can definitely do it. All right. Can you use this with ESL students? I feel like a lot of the tutors on here tonight are ESL tutors, so let's talk about that. Again, always remember to model first, and you're going to pare it down to only using the 2 headings. You're going to use fewer concept cards, fewer words. And again, making sure your learners are very familiar with those words first. And we recommend that you leave out that synonyms category. And the last strategy, or the last resource that I was going to share, is a journal where students can record new words that they find in a context clues journal. So let me explain how this works. So what is it? It's a place to list new words that were read within context. So a word that they read while they were reading in their standout book, or maybe they were reading some other story with you from a different resource. And they say, what does this word mean? I don't know what it means. So we always want to encourage, again, depending on the level of the student, to try to use context clues to figure out the word. This is going to be harder for ESL students because they're still learning the language and they're still learning words. This would be geared more towards intermediate or advanced. And it can just be in a notebook or just on pieces of paper stapled together. It doesn't have to be fancy. So who uses context clues and when are they used? Do you use them when you are reading? I'm a big reader. I read a lot. So we all use context clues, right? We use them all the time. Yep, exactly. So nobody knows all the definitions of every word in our language. That's impossible. So we often have to use the clues before, and don't forget about after. A lot of students want to stop reading, and as soon as they hit the word, they stop and they think, and you have to encourage them. You have to keep going. You have to keep going to at least to the end of the sentence, but sometimes even another sentence or another couple of sentences. So it's the words before and after, and again, it could be a couple of sentences later. So your students, they get to be a word detective, like Olivia Benson, if anybody knows who that is. And this is a real world example. This is a book I read I don't know, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. I like this author, Ruth Ware. She writes mysteries. So in this book was the sentence, "The interior of the Aurora was gobsmacking." Can we tell what that underlined word means from that sentence? Nope, we really can't. Because that word literally could mean great or awful. It could mean completely different things. We don't know because we don't get any more hints. So it is not possible to tell using that sentence what that word means. Therefore, we have to continue reading. We have to read the next couple of sentences. Now, is it more clear once we've continued reading a little bit more? Maybe. Definitely building a better picture, right? It's definitely giving me more of an image in my head. But I'm going to keep reading. And now I have a much better picture. And so I think this is a good example of why and how. Don't let students stop at the end of the sentence where the new word is. Encourage them to keep going. Okay, and keep going. Sometimes they have to keep going a few sentences even. And now I can tell, right, by what are some words that help me figure out what this word means? Bling, long curving staircase, every surface and polished, encased in marble, draped with raw silk. I'm envisioning, right? I've got a good image in my head now of big, just over the top decorations, maybe like beautiful, elaborate, elegant, right? I have a much better picture now in my head. So a reminder, and it's not always going to become clear, right? Context clues don't always work. It's great when they do, but they don't. It's not foolproof. We can never say that you can always use context clues because sometimes the context doesn't allow for us to determine the meaning of the word. It just doesn't happen. So in those cases, you have to use some other strategy. But when we can use context clues, it's really great to use them because it's stimulating critical thinking. And when they can come to the definition themselves, it's going to stick in their brains. It's very rewarding, but it forces them to think. So when you can, context clues are definitely a good skill, definitely a good strategy, definitely great for students studying for the GED. And then the last thing to share is the journal. So we take those new words we found and we write it here. And again, this can just be, they can write this in a notebook, doesn't have to be anything fancy. This column is, optional, but I find sometimes it's helpful to note where you came across the word. And so you could add that column, but not entirely necessary. And the column over here is, what do you think it means? And you don't have to be right. Like, that's okay if they're not entirely or even partially correct. It's okay. But to put a couple of words here or what definition they think that it means. Okay. And then the last slide that I have is another couple of columns, options that you could add. So here's our new word. Again, could use this column, but don't have to. This one's necessary because this is where they're saying what they think the word means. And if you want to add a column to see Was I right? And they could use a dictionary or Google search, whatever, to figure it out. If they weren't right, if they were not correct, then that's okay. And they can add what the definition is over here. So when I used to have students just have an ongoing list, and it just went on and on and on. And some classes we added 1 or 2 words. Some classes we didn't add any words. Some classes maybe you add 3 words. It's authentic, which is what is nice. It gives them something to refer back to if they see that word again somewhere and they're like, oh, wait, I remember I put that in my context clues journal. That gives them a connection. They can go look it up. But getting them to write, and again, having it be in like an authentic setting is a good connection to make to the word, as opposed to like giving them a list and saying, look up the definitions of these words. That's not going to be quite as effective. I'm so sorry if my connection is bad. I'm hoping that you all are hearing me. Does anyone have any questions or comments about any of those strategies? It's 7:43, so I think it'd probably be a good time to stop and see if anyone has any questions or comments.
This is Paula. This is
Hi.
Hi. This is really helpful. My students, the students that I work with, are really pretty new. They've been in the country about a year. So are these kind of so are they ready for this kind of thing, or is that really something I just kind of have to judge on a class by class basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. Are they ready for this? Well, here's the thing. I would say, oh, good. I'm glad. Thank you for the comments. I am seeing them, and I think they're easy to implement too. I think they're things we can do tomorrow, right, in your class. But here's the thing: if you try something, and I would say, Paula, don't start probably with this context clues journal. I'd start with the first part. I would start with the Frayer model for sure. I think that they could potentially be ready for that. And here's the thing: if you try it out and then you quickly determine that they're not, that's okay. So, that goes for everything you do. You can try things and you might be surprised, might be pleasantly surprised. But you also might realize, no, they're not ready for that yet. And that's totally fine. Maybe you revisit it again in 2 months or 5 months, whatever. But also keep in mind, remember that there's so many adaptations, right? So you can, oops, let me go way back to the Frayer model one. Remember that you can adapt it to your students. So I would start out with this activity first. And then you would ideally have, like a little set of cards that you would keep adding to, or if they just do it in a notebook, that's fine. Then at least they have a place where they all stay there in that place. And they're learning new words. So I don't think there's any harm in trying this strategy and seeing how they do. Anybody else? I'm so sorry for the poor connection, but I think turning off the muting and the cameras, I think that helped. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I think with anything with tutoring, you're gonna try some things and you're gonna have high hopes, and then they're just gonna bomb, and that's totally fine. That's part of teaching. That's just natural. Um, and then again, it's okay because you realize, no, not quite ready for that yet. Maybe I'll give that another try in a little bit, couple months or something. Can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? Yes. I will figure out how that happens. Actually, I don't, this is a good question. If you want, I'm actually not going to know. I guess I could look up like the Zoom. If you want a copy of the PowerPoint, do me a favor. I'm going to put my email in here just to make sure that actually happens because I'm not sure. So let's do this. That's an L ready at literacypittsburgh.org. Just send me a quick email and just say, I was in the tutor talk. Can I have the PowerPoint, please? And I'll email it over to you. But there will be a recording. I'm not sure like when they put it up on the website. But I will find out. I think it's probably within like a couple of days. It goes up on the tutor website. But yeah, that's my email, L for Lynn, ready, READY at literacypittsburgh.org. Okay, are there any more questions? I appreciate you attending. If that's all, then yeah, we're done. And thank you for being here. And I'm sorry about the connection again. Okay, take care, everybody. Have a good night. Bye.